It was an ordinary, boring day for Officers Daniels and Mitchell, as they were on a routine patrol. They decided to chat with their colleagues, but their conversation was interrupted when an elderly woman fell in front of them instead of helping her. They couldn't stop laughing, but their laughter didn't last long, as they soon discovered who this mysterious woman was and how much trouble they were about to face. Who exactly was this elderly woman? Should they apologize for their behavior? And more importantly, would they lose their jobs if they didn't? But before we start, hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, and press the notification bell so you don't miss any new stories. When Officers Daniels and Mitchell first joined the police force, they were young, enthusiastic recruits ready to enforce the law and serve their city. However, that changed over time, as their courage and honor faded, and they became men who laughed at a woman's misfortune. Instead of helping her, the routine patrols became boring, and minor crimes seemed repetitive and unimportant to them. They felt that their potential was not being used in work they considered worthy of their abilities. Clara always made sure her clothes were elegant and her hair was neatly arranged, with a sharp rush in her breathing. She stumbled and fell, and her bag dropped to the ground, spilling most of its contents for everyone to see. Officers Daniels and Mitchell were close to where she fell, and the action they took afterward changed the course of their careers forever. Instead of rushing to help her, after hearing her slightly panicked scream, the two men did something unimaginable. An inappropriate laugh escaped from Officer Daniels's lips, but that wasn't the worst part, as Officer Mitchell burst out in loud laughter. Poor Clara, who suffered minor injuries from her skin being scratched by the stone, tried to lift herself off the ground. Daniels commented with a smile on his face, and Mitchell responded to the joke with laughter. They didn't notice the disapproving looks from the onlookers, while small crowds gathered around the incident. A young woman approached Clara and gently turned her to examine her injuries. When she stood up again, she gave the two officers an angry look, who were still laughing. Seeing that they hadn't noticed whether Clara was okay or not, the woman gave them a look of contempt. "How could you?" The young woman's voice trembled with anger as she addressed the two officers who stopped joking around. They felt untouchable in their uniforms, but when they discovered who Clara really was, they realized that wasn't the case. The woman continued, "Is this the kind of protection and service we're supposed to expect from you?" Officer Mitchell asked Officer Daniels in a low voice about the woman's identity. Daniels replied hesitantly, "I don't know, but I have a strong feeling we should find out." Meanwhile, Clara was gently escorted to a nearby seat, where concerned bystanders tried to comfort her and tend to the small wounds on her skin. Clara sat on the bench treating her minor injuries, while inside her, a storm of emotions raged. The officers' laughter echoed in her ears, and their faces were imprinted in her memory. Over the years, she noticed the number of officers patrolling the streets had decreased. The city was growing, and with it came new challenges. Crime rates increased, and the police force seemed strained. She understood the pressures they faced, the long hours and the thankless tasks. The next morning, the incident became the talk of the city. Cafes, grocery stores, and street corners were buzzing with talk about the incident. As the days passed and weeks turned, the initial shock of the incident began to turn into growing resentment. The community's trust in the police force, which was once unshakable, began to diminish. Parents warned their children to be cautious, and elderly residents like Clara felt uneasy when they saw a police car. Subscribe. The city had a rich history of respecting its officers. They were considered heroes, protectors of peace, and enforcers of justice. The city mourned the loss of the police force's pure image, wishing for the return of a time when officers were symbols of hope and trust. When Officers Daniels and Mitchell entered the police station the next day, the atmosphere was noticeably different. The usual morning jokes were absent, replaced by a heavy silence. As they headed to their desks, they felt the weight of many eyes on them. The usual greetings of recognition were gone, replaced by cold and distant looks. As the day went on, it became clear that Daniels and Mitchell had been labeled as a disgraced duo in the station. They hadn't just shamed themselves, but had cast a shadow over the entire department. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on Daniels and Mitchell, and their previous indifference turned into constant worry. In their offices, Officers Daniels and Mitchell immediately turned on their computers and accessed the city database, hoping to find any information about Clara. Despite their extensive efforts, Clara's identity remained mysterious. She was like a ghost, present in their memory, but absent from all records. Exhausted and on the verge of giving up, Daniels decided to take a break and headed to the headquarters archive. Among the dusty shelves and old case files, an old yellowed newspaper caught his attention. Out of curiosity, he began flipping through it. As he turned the pages, an article caught his eye. The headline referred to a major event from years ago, and as he kept reading, he realized he might have found an important piece of the puzzle. Quickly, Daniels returned to the shared office, the old newspaper held tightly in his hand. "Mitchell, you have to see this." The article talked about a community event from decades ago, celebrating the resilience and spirit of the city's residents. It mentioned prominent figures, philanthropists, and everyday heroes. But what caught the officer's attention was the mention of a woman named Clara, who played a pivotal role in a community project. The details matched Clara's description, and the timing seemed right. Next to the article, there was an old black and white photo showing a group of people, but one face stood out, young Clara, her eyes shining with determination and kindness, looking at them. They had discovered a part of her past, a chapter of her life immortalized in the press. They had laughed at a woman who was celebrated in the very city they had sworn to protect. The feeling of guilt was overwhelming. They had to make amends, not just for themselves, but for Clara and the legacy she represented. The officers began planning their approach. They would visit Clara, confront their mistake directly, and offer a sincere apology. Officers Daniels and Mitchell took deep breaths outside Clara's house. They knocked softly and waited. When Clara answered, her eyes were filled with a mix of surprise and exhaustion. The officers swallowed nervously, hoping she would give them a few minutes of her time to ask for her forgiveness. Inside Clara's cozy living room, the officers began to speak. "We are deeply sorry for our actions, ma'am," Daniels began, his eyes lowered. Mitchell added, "We failed in our duty, not just as officers, but as human beings." Their apology was sincere, and their regret was clear. Clara listened attentively, her face unreadable. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "We all make mistakes," she said, her voice gentle. "What matters is that we learn from them." Her words were filled with grace and understanding, showing her great forgiveness. She acknowledged their sincere regret, and with her wisdom she gave them a chance to make amends, eager to make things right in any way possible. The officers offered to escort Clara to her special place. When they arrived, they realized they were in a beautifully preserved memorial garden. In front of them stood a statue honoring the community's heroes from the past. Clara's eyes sparkled with tears as she shared stories of the individuals immortalized in stone, reminding the officers of the values they had pledged to uphold. As Clara continued, she dropped a surprise that left the officers stunned. "My youngest son," she said proudly. "He took his older brother's place and became the chief of police." The weight of this information settled heavily on Daniels and Mitchell. They had laughed at their commander's mother, a woman who had given so much to the city and the police force. Seeing their shock, Clara continued, "I didn't tell my son. I thought you two would realize your mistake and apologize." Her faith in their innate goodness and the possibility of redemption was clear. "Anyone can lose their way," she said calmly, "but it's never too late to find the right path again." With bowed heads, they made a silent vow to Clara and her heroic son, and to themselves, that they would strive to be better, to honor their roles, and to serve their community with sincerity, compassion, and respect. As the days and weeks passed, the community began to notice the change in Officers Daniels and Mitchell. Their sincere efforts to make amends and their dedication to their roles slowly started to rebuild the trust that had been broken. The story of Officers Daniels and Mitchell became a beacon of hope for the city. The story was a reminder that it is never too late to correct mistakes and return to the path of honor.